In this video, I'm going to look at how we can plot a graph of y equals x. So we can move on to the next slide and we can look at y equals x. And I'm going to plot this onto the axis you can see appearing. And you will note I have an x and a y axis. And if you look, I'm going up from 1 to 2 to 3, all the way up to 5 on the y-axis. And along the x-axis, I'm going from 1 to 2 to 3, all the way along to 6. I will need to plot some points onto the graph, and I'm going to achieve that by using the table that's coming into view. I'm going to choose an appropriate value for x, and the value I'm going to choose is the one coming into view now. Now, the question we need to ask is, what's the value of y when x is 1? Well, we can see here that y equals x. So y is going to be the same value as x, which is 1. So we can write y is 1. Now, this pair give a coordinate position on the graph where x is 1 and y is 1. So I'm going to draw a red line where we have x is 1. And you can see x is 1 along that line, and it would go further the line. But I've stopped at that point because the y has got the value of 1. So I'm going to come across from where y is 1. And now where they intersect, I'm going to place a plotting point that you can see bouncing into position now. So it's effectively at the crossing of the two red lines. I'll remove those lines now and we're left with the plot. The next thing we can do is to choose another value for x, and you can see that floating into position where x is 2. Now we need to ask, well, what's the value of y when x is 2? Well, clearly it's going to be 2 because we can see y equals x. So that floats into position. And this pair will now give us a coordinate position on the graph. So I'm going to draw from the 2 up, and I'm going to draw from the y across, as you can see. Now, where those lines intersect, we place a plotting point, as you can see, bouncing into position now. Moving on, I'm going to look to the table, and I'm going to set x to the value of 3. Now, this means that y will be the value of 3. So these are the coordinates. If you now look to the graph, you can see I'm coming up from the x-axis where we have the value 3, and I'm coming across from 3 on the y-axis. And where they intersect, you can see that I'm drawing a plotting point. Moving along, we can now choose the value of x as 4. This will give us the value of y of 4. And these are the coordinate positions that I will plot on the graph. So I will come up from the 4 on the x-axis, and I'll come along from the 4 on the y-axis, and where they intersect, you can see there's a plotting point. Now, each of the plotting points have a coordinate position, and let's have a look at what they are. We can see that this one is at position 1, 1. Now, this is the x value, and this is the y value. If you look at this one, it's at 2, 2, where this is the x value and this is the y value. And we can carry on and see this is at 3, 3, and this one here is at 4, 4. So every plot that I've made has a coordinate position, and that coordinate position was taken from this table here. You now use these plots to judge where you would draw the graph, and as you can see, the graph goes through each of the points of the coordinate positions we've plotted. I'll remove the coordinate values, and I'm going to look to the x-axis, and I'm going to choose 5. And I'm going to ask the question, how can I use the graph to tell me what the value of y is when I've chosen a position on the x-axis of 5? Well, it's straightforward. You simply go up to the plot of the graph, and then you go along to the y-axis, and you can see that it is 5. So when x is 5, we can see that y is 5, And that should be the case, because if you remember, the graph you're looking at is a plot of this, where y equals x. So it stands to reason if x is 5, then y is going to be 5. So we can see we can use the graph to show us values of y for certain values of x. Let's consider another example, and on this occasion I'm going to choose this position here between the 3 and the 4. I'm going to choose where x is 3.5. So you go up to the graph, you then go along to the y-axis, and you can see that that is between the 3 and the 4, and in fact that is 3.5. And again, it should be, because remember, y equals x. Now I'd like to move on and ask a question. Have a look at the graph and ask yourself this question. Where does the graph, which is a straight line graph, cross the x-axis, and where does it cross the y-axis? Now, if you look carefully, it crosses it at the position shown by that bouncing circle. You can see it crosses the x-axis and the y-axis at this coordinate position, 0, 0, where x is 0 and where y is 0. And knowing where any plot crosses the x-axis and the y-axis is very important when dealing with graphs, and we'll explain why in later videos in this playlist. Let's consider the plot on this slide again, and you can see we've got y equals x, and I'm filling the table up and plotting the various points. Now I'll let the animation run. And you can see that the line was drawn through all of the plotting points, and the plotting points were lined up in a straight line. So what you're looking at here is an example of a straight line graph. And I knew it was going to be a straight line graph before I plotted it, because I can recognize it from this here, y equals x. And we'll discuss how straight line graphs can be identified even before you plot them in the videos that are coming up in this playlist.